Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chai, and on today's episode, I'm super excited to interview Brendan Van Deventer. He is the founder of Crest, which is an asset management as a service company. So think LPs or ownership groups will hire him to run asset management for them. And the reason I'm excited to interview him is he is the sharpest asset manager I've ever met when it comes to marketing. He majored in it in college, but I can tell he's just kept up with the times, and I can have a high-level marketing conversation with him, which I can't have with any other asset manager. So on this episode, I'm picking his brain to see how he views marketing and the whole role of making deals work and what he sees the best property management companies do. Now, he gives a little bit of a sneak peek into what he looks for in third-party RFPs that will either put them in contention for the firm he's going to choose or immediately disqualify them. So if you're in third party and you want to know how is asset management or an LP going to look at our marketing mix and our plan and how we structure our organization, you definitely want to listen to this episode. Enjoy. Brendan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Eden. Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, so the reason that I wanted to bring you on here and pick your brain is outside of just being one of the sharpest asset management guys I know, I want to peek into the lens of how you really perceive marketing and technology, because not too many people have seen as many tech stacks, marketing departments, third-party firms as you have. And I'm curious what things have really stood out to you. Like, is there any like technology or marketing play that's really stood out to you when you're looking at some of these third-party groups?
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. We do, being a third-party asset management company, we work with, at this point, 9 different property management companies. And then throughout my career, we've worked with all the majors out there, and then most of the regionalized groups as well. And it's interesting. There's definitely a huge place for technology in the multifamily world, and I think everyone is slowly figuring it out, and figuring out which pieces are really beneficial depending on where you sit, in the capital stack, and then what type of organization you are. To me, on the marketing side, it really is coming down to reputation management, and then really trying to figure out how to get the bang for your buck. Like everyone is really focused on cost per lease. And I think like everything else in the multifamily space on the expense side right now, we've just continued to see that go up. Most people will underwrite $250 to $300 a unit in marketing expenses, and you're probably seeing closer to $400 to $600. And this is we primarily focus on class C up to B class garden style. It's primarily what we're working on. Your class A new developments can have a much bustier marketing budget, but so I think there's definitely a place for it. Where we have seen technology be really helpful in that space has been there's a company out there that helps us with review removals called Consumer Fusion. So basically, whenever a tenant has a negative experience, most of the time it's due to something that sometimes is their doing, where they're getting evicted. They had some fight with a manager or with another resident, and they run to Google and they blast it on Google, or their friend had a bad tour, they put it on Google and they don't list anything specific. You can actually get that stuff removed. It's very time consuming to do that, and you have to basically submit it through Google. This company effectively uses AI to scrape your reviews and submits them on your behalf. We've had it across 3 properties for the last 9 months, and we've had 75 negative reviews removed. So that's been very beneficial to work in the background as we kind of work on new review strategies on the front end.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's been a great tool. So some of these other technologies that have been rolled in on, I'll say the marketing side, for us at least, that we've seen, the biggest one that management companies now push is Radix. Radix is a
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. It's basically a quote unquote automated market survey platform where if the property manager at site A puts in their information, so traffic tours from their past week, and then concessions that they're offering, and prices for each floor plan, they submit that into the system. All the other properties that are using Radix within the comp set that you identify will then show up kind of in your market survey on a weekly basis. And we've seen management companies really push this because their management teams now don't have to like call around or shop their comps, which is great in that sense. The negative that we've seen is because they're not doing that, the managers themselves, the leasing professionals, and the regionals and VPs now don't have as good of a grasp on what's actually going on in the market, and that's been a real struggle in that sense. And then you're also just relying on the data now that's coming from another manager or another leasing agent that may or may not be providing accurate information. It's not validated on that end. So we struggle there, and really the biggest focus and the focus for these management teams when they look at that is just the per square foot cost. And it's blending your classic and renovated rents most of the time as well. So you're not really getting the breakdown that you really want to see to really be able to make strategic pricing decisions. And then that rolls into the I think into the revenue management side as well, which we have mixed feelings about. It's I think on stabilized deals, revenue management can be really impactful, really to help you juice kind of the last piece of the pie out of these deals. And that's been interesting to see. Where it's been a problem for us is we've had a challenge getting these different pricing softwares to set proper floors and proper spreads between each floor plan type without having.
You would think that's pretty simple, right? Like I feel like that's the first thing I would want to put in if I let someone take the reins over my pricing, is like, what's the floor and ceiling?
Yeah. So they'll bake that in, but then they'll have a staleness factor that gets added onto a unit that sits for 10 days, or it sits for 35 days, but that unit's actually been sitting for 35 days because it's been under renovation, not actually sitting on the market for 35 days. So if that's not identified in the system properly, then the pricing software picks it up as a unit that's been sitting there and will slash the pricing drastically. And then there's probably a concession layered on top of that. So all of a sudden you're renting a renovated unit for less than a classic unit plus a concession, and you don't find out until the lease is already signed, just because there's like multiple different things that happen behind the scenes with this, with the management software having to speak to the pricing software, which has been tough for us on like lease ups and renovation plays in the middle of those programs.
So let me ask you this. Technology is a major asset to any property management business because everyone feels extremely strapped. You don't have time to do anything. So it's very attractive, and you see this like low-hanging fruit. Let me just outsource this. Let me just tack revenue management on. Let me get this review removal software you were talking about. Let me automate my market surveys. How do you strike the balance between when it makes sense to automate and when it can actually be a crutch that kind of removes the accountability from you, right? Because that data needs context. Revenue management, it didn't have the context, and if you're leaving it for too long, then it sets a floor that's way too low that you would never want to rent that unit out at that price. So how do you strike this balance between when you implement technology thoughtfully and when it's becoming a crutch for your team to say, I don't have to do this anymore?
Yeah. I think to me, it's utilizing technology in a way that helps with organization, I think, more than like driving the value. So like I do appreciate the CRMs that have come out, the Knox of the world that actually have lead management come in. Those have their own kind of flaws in my mind right now, where you can kind of select all on some outstanding leads and then just blast a follow up to all of them. That's not necessarily customized. But I think that is very helpful for a property manager or regional VP to go in there and actually be able to see what is being sent to every every prospect. Calls are recorded, so they in theory can review those calls. So to me, that is very helpful, and then it helps the leasing agent, work through their process if they're handling it properly, and if they're being managed properly and trained properly. Um, and then the like Monday.coms of the world, I think are very helpful in terms of tasks and who you are, you know, putting responsible for each task and by what date. That's been really helpful for us, if we're managing 35 different deals across, 5 clients and 9 different property managers, just being able to have stuff organized and, dates to everything, and then who's being held accountable for all of these items has been really helpful for us. Um,
So what I'm gathering is, so instead of using a software to take over the follow-up piece, let's say you would rather implement a technology that empowers the leasing agent to be able to perform more personalized follow-up at scale instead of replacing the function for them.
yes.
So
Yeah.
they're still in charge. You're just using the technology to kind of boost them up, like put them on a pedestal so they can do way more than they could have without the technology. Like you're not replacing them, you're just giving them kind of superpowers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think the customized approach needs to still be hammered home. Whether that's a phone call or a text. I do really believe in calling people, and I really think it's all about speed. So, we have seen traffic to tour conversion rates come down in a lot of our markets, and I do think it has something to do with a lot of the just automated email follow up that you get when you put a guest card in to a apartment building, and then you don't actually hear from someone for 3 days. By that point, you've probably already gone and toured 5 other deals, and you're probably going to lease elsewhere. I don't mean to plug your own product, but like I did just I have demoed your new callback product, and like that to me is the right type of technology because it's an immediate accountability tool and it gets your leasing agent on the phone with a prospect right away. So we have, and to me that's vitally important to getting in front of these leads. Even if they don't answer, you leave a voicemail, you can then send a text right after. But just to be able to get that person to come in and tour and then sell them on your asset is critical. And I mean, shows you care. Like we have a client that they're a fully vertically integrated owner operator. They've brought us in on the asset management side to help them kind of get their property management, construction management, acquisitions to kind of function together. Um, and they had an idea to do something similar to what you're doing, but they're using effectively a VA call center. Um, and quite frankly, it just hasn't worked because it's going to folks that are not leasing professionals to handle this, and it's just been very hard to hold them accountable, and it's been kind of a revolving door. Like what you're doing is having effectively the call come in directly to the leasing agent, to the manager, into the office. Someone's going to answer it, and then they're then going to be directed and connected directly to the prospect within a minute of them applying or putting in a guest card. So surely they have some time at that point. So that to me is critical, and to be able to get them in the door at this point has been pretty massive. Because I think what we're seeing is the traffic to tour ratios are dropping. The tour to app ratios are still pretty similar. Like you're still seeing 30 to 40% conversions there, but then we're seeing a huge drop off in application to lease execution, which is primarily being driven by denials and fraud. And I guess that's another piece where I think technology is massively important and helpful is on the fraud detection side. We roll out a company. I don't know if you know Vero.
Yeah.
So we've been rolling out Vero pretty much since their inception everywhere that our management teams will allow it. They all use Snapped or Vero, or there's a couple others out there. All the property management softwares have their own screening softwares
Yeah.
too. But
you can't live without it.
no, but what Vero what we've really liked about Vero is they kind of bundle, checkpoint ID on the front end in with their screening. So you can remove a checkpoint ID for a cheaper cost, get Vero in. And then when they actually go through the screening process, we make Vero a part of the application process. And what they do is they effectively will scrape bank accounts and find patterns of direct deposits so they can verify incomes that way. And then they have their own, background check, security check in there as part of their software as well. And then, of course, like we always encourage our management teams to call and confirm anyway if they can. But what Vero has done is it's effectively turned our time from application to lease execution and approval from 4 to 5 days if you have to do all that by hand to like 1 to 2 days. And then we're catching fraud on the front end before it even gets through our properties and into our rent roll. So that's been huge as well. But you basically need more traffic is what I'm getting at. Like you need more traffic and you need more qualified traffic, and then you need to be able to get in front of that qualified traffic once you generate it and get them into tour your property, because it's
your take is very different than what a lot of people are saying right now, because I talk to a lot of real estate owners who look at this technology as a shiny way not to rely on humans anymore. But I think one thing people are discounting is, let's say you're renting the average apartment rent, let's say it's $30,000-$40,000 a year, right? That's the biggest purchase that like 90+% of people will make in a year, right? So the bigger the purchase is, I'm a firm believer, the more you want some sort of human element involved to put you at ease, give you some trust, and make sure that you're making the right decision. You have more nerves about making the wrong decision, the bigger the purchase size goes. When it comes to a car, I mean, let's say Tesla, you'll do this whole e-commerce checkout thing, but you pick up the car from a person, you did a test drive with a person, and they put you at ease. So the trend that I'm seeing with what you're saying, which is very different than a lot of the other conversations I've had, is you still want a human accountable for the value that you're supposed to get from the technology. And the technology is just a hammer. It's just a tool, right? Like if they're a construction worker, it's just like this special hammer that makes them do their job better. But you're not getting rid of them for a machine to take over, because the danger with replacing an entire function with technology is they're not a person. So you can blame technology. No one's being blamed. Technology is not going to suddenly start speaking up, even if it's AI, and say, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm not doing a good job. Let me do better. That's not how it works. So it's very easy to fall into that trap of, oh, well, we outsourced that whole follow-up function, so you can't blame anyone here for not doing a good job.
Yeah.
You're saying, no, I gave you the technology because I want you to have a higher potential, a higher ceiling, and I'm empowering you with it. But at the end of the day, the burden needs to fall on somebody's shoulders to get it done, which I firmly believe is the right way to go about it. I think it's very attractive. Let's just replace this person and make this part of technology, and it'll work 7 days a week. But I think the people who are really going to succeed are looking at it the way that you're looking at it, which is it's just a superpower.
There's definitely a place for it too. And I mean, there is to me, like, the Tour 24s out there that have the self-guided tours. Like, I think that's a great tool to have as an after-hours option. But I still think when that person is putting their inquiry in, they should be getting called by a person. I think after their tour, the next morning, they should be getting called or emailed by a person. They can get automated follow-ups as well, like as just reminders and like just, keep putting it in their ear. But I do think that personal connection is massive on that front.
For sure. So, the role of technology has definitely changed in the last couple of years. I feel like people are leaning into these solutions a lot more in 2024 than they were in 2021 or 2022. You have this 30,000 foot view because you've worked with all these different property management companies and you're working on so many different deals. What are some trends that you've seen across your different clients on how they're viewing marketing and technology differently now than they might have been a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Well, everyone's trying to implement AI driven tools. So that's one piece. I think on the marketing side, it's a challenge. Quite frankly, depending on what market we're in, I think the the problem we are seeing and the struggle we are having is there's such a heavy reliance on like the apartments.coms of the world, and these subscription based products that, quite frankly, I think there is definitely a massive place for them, and I think you do need to have them as part of your marketing stack. But I don't necessarily know if you need to have the highest level going at all times on these, B and C class deals in order to generate the traffic and tour activity that you need. So I think where the struggle has really been, and I think what people are starting to realize on the marketing side is they didn't really have to care about it before. Um, it was, in the grand scheme of things, it was just another expense, and rents were all moving in such a direction, over the last 2 or 3 years that, quite frankly, it didn't matter. Like, especially in the value add space that we are primarily in, like it was just a bunch of fix and flip type deals. Rents were going to move 15 to 20% without you really having to do anything. The supply hadn't caught up to the demand like it has now. So it really wasn't stressed as much as it is now. And now that these deals are so tight, everyone is really hyper focusing on the marketing spend. But at the same time, all these deals are struggling with occupancy because there's so much supply. So groups are really trying to figure out now, I think, the marketing side. And like most owners, and so much has changed. Like, I was actually a marketing major in college and a real marketing and real estate major in college, but so much has changed over the last 11 years that it's kind of obsolete in terms of kind of internet search marketing at this point. That sponsors and asset managers are kind of learning on the fly with groups like yourself. So it's becoming a heavy reliance there. And quite frankly, most of these sponsors are relying directly on the management companies to handle the marketing and the marketing analytics. And I think that's where there's a big gap. Like, I think the marketing analytics is there's a huge hole there that I'm sure groups like you are trying to solve in terms of where leads are actually coming from, because everyone has tracking numbers and tracking links on all of their marketing products now. But where the struggle often comes is, we're spending, call it $7,000 a month on, the highest level apartments.com. We're technically only seeing, 10 leases, a quarter coming through that. So terrible conversions. But how many of our people that actually came in and toured as a drive-by first saw us on apartments.com, but didn't actually, do anything application or guest card wise through apartments.com? So how do we really track that they came from there or did not without having to, pepper them?
And you work with a bunch of different groups, which I imagine all do this very differently than each other. So when you're looking at different property management companies, obviously marketing is a big piece of what you're going to, critique or analyze on whether you should move forward with them. What are some red flags that come to mind? What would make you pick one versus not when it comes to the marketing side?
So there's a couple things. So first of all, you have to have one. So that's like to us at this point, a non-starter. If they're just going to say, the property manager and the regional handle our marketing, whether it's, reviewing our apartments.com leads, our, reviewing the websites, reviewing our pay-per-click campaigns, that's a non-starter for us. And then red flags that we see, like we do quarterly, marketing audits on our end as part of CRES for our clients. And then when we're, looking at management companies or onboarding new properties to our platform, we do a marketing audit right away. And what we often find when we're doing these marketing audits is, I'll just Google the property, I'll call the number on Google, and the line is disconnected. So the tracking, because that's a tracking number, that's not necessarily the property line. So the tracking numbers break. So the tracking number's broken. All the photos on their Google page are, all their old photos are just photos from residents that are upset. So it's photos of bugs and, broken bathtubs and garbage, stuff like that. Then you'll get into their website and, they have a different special that's being offered on their website versus apartments.com. There's no easy way to actually apply. They don't have, stuff that's, they have apartments.com package going, but they don't have the virtual tours on there that are a part of the apartments.com package that they should be utilizing. Like all things like that are red flags as we're doing these audits, and that we identify, and they're very easy fixes. reviews that are not being answered or that are just a pattern of awful reviews with automated responses. That's another thing that drives me nuts on the review side is it's just like I'm sorry you're upset, like please call the office, to all these reviews when it's 15 of the same thing and there's a clear problem. um but that's those are red flags that we see, and that if management companies have that stuff ongoing at their current property, is like they're going to have it go ongoing at our property. And what we often see is like you'll sit in an RFP with these management companies and there'll be 30 people in there and they'll show you 10 different people that work on the marketing side, and they'll do a really good job at takeover. Like they'll get your Google page onboarded, they'll get your website up and running right away, they'll make sure it's connected to the PMS. Like all of that is going well, and then 2 months later it's kind of like hands are off the wheel and nobody is looking at this stuff anymore, and we end up bringing it to them. um, so that's kind of the red flags that we see as on kind of the marketing side. It's honestly, in our unprofessional marketing opinions, it's hard to get in and do kind of what someone from like an agency would do, like yourself, where you go in and you can do proper SEO audits. Maybe you'll teach me how to do this someday, but proper SEO audits and really understand if their marketing on their existing assets is working, is like effective or not. Um, and then we can be more thorough even in that sense too. But the other thing is questions on Google. Like people will put questions on there that never get looked at by the management teams because it's an afterthought. But someone will be. I had one property. It was like, why would someone live at this property when there's rattlesnakes like in every hallway? I was like,
That's the craziest thing.
Nobody responded to it, and it just sits there as the number one question on this property.
They're like, they look at that question, they're like, well, I don't know. So what about this?
There is no rattlesnakes that I've ever seen being there multiple times, but it's like stuff like that needs to get removed somehow or answered at least to debunk that stuff.
Right. So I guess to recap, if you don't have a dedicated marketing function, like you're not even going to consider it, right? And it's not about
Correct,
whether
yeah.
I've heard, in third-party pitches, people say, oh, but this person, they're very competent. They're very savvy. And it's not really about whether that regional or property manager is savvy or not. It's more about, in my opinion, you're giving somebody 2 full-time jobs and they're going to sacrifice one of them. So which one's it going to be? I'm not okay with them sacrificing either of these jobs because I need the asset to be run very well and I need the marketing to be run very well. So if you're giving somebody 2 full-time jobs, like I don't really care that you think they can do both of them. Maybe when they're isolated, they can do both of them well, but not at the same time. What about the third parties that have, like, let's say, in-house marketing agencies? Have you ever gotten those kinds of pitches?
No, actually. So someone that would just partner directly with an agency, bring them in, and say, "This is like our function, like our third party function."
Yeah, I mean, this is becoming more popular in the last couple of years. I've noticed it is big third party management companies starting their own agency in-house. So basically, instead of outsourcing to a firm to, let's say, run pay-per-click, they go, no, we have full-time pay-per-click specialists. They run all of this kind of stuff. And they might not do everything, like they might not do reputation management in-house, but most of the core marketing functions they'll be able to deliver in-house. So that is becoming also an increasingly popular thing to include in the third-party pitch, saying, oh, we don't just rely on an agency to do this work. We've built our own that's dedicated to our company, and we get their full attention.
Interesting. I have not seen that, but that would be very interesting. Very interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, there are some obvious like pros and cons. I guess I don't know how they bill back. They might charge you like an agency would. I don't know exactly how they bill back. But as far as attention goes, I think they might run into the same problems that every agency runs into, which is you can only give good attention to so many clients, and if they're trying to maximize the amount of properties that one team can run to like maximize the profitability of that team, that could go south the same way that a bad agency partnership could go south.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to monitor that and see if that's part of like the big transformation of how third-party companies succeed over the next 5 to 10 years. That could be a big part of it.
Yeah.
Is just running a lot of these things internally. Was there a time that you switched management companies and let's say there was a new strategy that stuck out, which was just miles better than the old one? How often have you had to make those kinds of transitions?
We've had to make management changes quite a bit. And it's honestly, it's never necessarily the strategy. It really is coming down to the people at these companies and the people in these markets that we have their attention and we have their kind of the relationship. That's something that within Crest has been hugely beneficial. Between our partner, the Bascom Groups, 40 years in the business and all of their relationship building. And then Tony and I's, careers so far in multifamily, we've built relationships with, many of the heads of these management companies and then these regionalized management companies. And quite honestly, like it all comes down to the regional and the VP in that market and who you can then call to kind of make sure they're doing their job within these management companies. So yeah, I mean, on average, on a 5-year hold value add, we probably go through like two. Two is probably two management companies
Wow.
in a deal. Yeah, and now that we're spending more time in certain markets, we start to understand who the right players are for us in each of those markets. And management company A may be really strong in Charlotte, but the same management company has failed multiple times in Dallas, for instance. So we know when we go to Charlotte, we know we have the right senior leadership team in place in that market that we have a personal relationship with. We know they're going to put their best people on the job, and then they'll kind of implement our management philosophies down through their team. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's been one strategy that's really changed everything. It's just been finding the right people on the ground.
Well, maybe it's that they know how to do that. Maybe their strategy is they know how to hire and retain the best people,
Yeah.
which seems to be the hardest part of this business. I mean, the turnover that I see, I had a call a couple of weeks ago with someone who I hadn't spoken to in a while since she left a firm. And when I spoke with her a year later, she was back at the firm that she had left.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like boomerang. And I see these transitions all the time. So maybe the strategy for these companies is that they know how to hire and retain the best people like per market.
Yeah. And
that's kind of what makes them stand out.
You're right. And it's easier in deals where we fully have control. Because quite frankly, like the way that multifamily real estate is structured, it's kind of flipped upside down in terms of, how people are compensated. So like you have
How do you mean?
Like you have a $50 million asset that's being run by a property manager that makes 65, 75, $85,000 a year. And if a deal down the street comes to them and says, we'll pay you $3 an hour more to basically do the same work or move to a class A property, like they're going to leave. Meanwhile, like the entire compensation structure for the GP and the LP is based on the performance of the asset that's being driven by the manager on the crowd. So when we have full control, we put in some really heavy incentives for our management teams that are achievable, but also extremely accretive to them. Like we won't do a $5,000 bonus if you hit NOI. It's like if you hit these couple factors, which is generally your reputation management, your NOI goals. We break out revenue and expenses separately. Your controllable expenses, and then really your we'll call it our conversion targets, I guess. We'll pay you outsized bonuses. So we'll pay you 25% of your salary, 30% of your salary, if you're achieving those goals. Because at the end of the day, like I'm fine, more than happy to pay a manager a outsized bonus if they're going to achieve our goals. Because at the end of the day, that's all we need them to do. And I know that if they have that kind of hanging out there as a potential gain, like a couple dollar an hour more down the road for to go take the same job and then get a $5,000 bonus if they hit those targets is much more attractive. But a lot of these,
what you just covered, I feel like people forget this is an option, right? So
Yeah.
I had a lease up in New Jersey. I forget what town this was, but one of my friends is running marketing for that portfolio, and they had this lease up that was really struggling. So she had me take a look at their whole marketing mix. I just wanted to help her out as a friend. And I looked at it, and it was very strong. Like they really were getting traffic from all the right places, and just the conversion wasn't there. And she had like an extra $1,000 a month. to spend. And I'm looking at this marketing mix and I can't figure out where she should spend this. And I go, I'm not going to say her name, but I said, I would say, Brendan, just give this money to the leasing agent. Like just turn this $1,000 a month into additional incentives for a leasing agent. And people forget that this is something they can do. I said, go tell management, oh, you wanted me to spend an extra $1,000 a month? We're not spending it on marketing. We're spending on leasing incentives, and they're just going to work harder and they're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them extra $200 for every lease they bring in.
Right.
And she crushed it. And she said it was absolutely the right move because that $1,000 would have fallen on deaf ears. It wouldn't have gotten her anything because there was no additional relevant traffic for her to capture. She just needed to make what she already had work a little bit better. And I don't know why what you just said is not more commonplace, but people forget that it's even something they can do, right? Just because you have the marketing budget doesn't mean you have to spend it on marketing. Maybe you just need your fundamentals to run a little bit better and make everyone a little bit more motivated to make the deal work.
Yeah. It's all people driven. And every management company will tell you they are struggling on the people side in terms of retaining talent. And it's literally just a battle of like salary. It's not necessarily the additional upside that they can gain in these deals.
And I'm seeing a lot of people leave the industry altogether. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's accelerated over the last couple of years as the job has gotten harder, right? A couple of years ago, you touched on this. A supply-constrained market fixes a lot of problems, right? Let's say you have a pay-per-click campaign that's doing zero for you. And you get this report. It's a fancy report. It's got your agency branded. It looks beautiful. A bajillion conversions for pennies on the dollar. But you might not even realize that actually didn't bring in one lease or one tour. Not a single person was qualified. They were all, let's say, looking for Section 8 or were outside of the rent range of your property altogether. In a supply-constrained market 2 years ago, that's probably something that you would let fly for maybe even a year. But now, when every dollar is being scrutinized and it's an existential crisis to make sure that money comes back to you, that agency is getting booted. And you're swapping that out for somebody else. And that's what we're seeing right now. So the battle for people and just making sure every resource is used properly has definitely amped up in the last couple of years because we don't have that crutch of, supply in this market's constrained, so it doesn't matter how poorly we run A, B, and C. It's just kind of going to work anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I think let's cap it off with one final question. I want to know, since you've seen so many different marketing departments and strategies, is there one thing that you wish people knew about the way asset managers like yourself will view marketing? Maybe something that particularly grinds your gears or ticks you off, or just wish they would just align with the way that you really perceive it?
I think it's efficiency is the biggest heartache that I have when it comes to marketing. Like the first thing groups will, we're all about how to optimize these assets, how to reduce expenses where we can in order and to drive our revenues. And like I was touching on earlier, like our marketing budgets our marketing line items have exploded on a cost per unit basis. And most of that's not driven by, additional resident events or paying referral fees or locator fees. It's really being driven by just dumping more money into apartments.com or to, overspending on pay-per-click campaigns when there is a level of diminishing returns. Like at a certain point, you're just putting extra dollars in to put extra dollars in, and you're not actually seeing the benefit of that. And we're not finding the root cause of why we're not getting the traffic that we really need to really need to compete. Like if I'm in a submarket and 7 of the properties are on Diamond Plus, but only one of those properties on Diamond Plus is, the same Class C style garden style I am, like I don't think I need to be on Diamond Plus. Like I think I can be on Gold and get the same number of views as I would anyway. Than I would on, Diamond Plus and spending triple the budget, and then not allocating enough into, the pay-per-click side and the SEO optimization side, which quite frankly, I don't think asset managers are educated enough. Speaking broadly now, probably not a fair statement, but I don't think we fully understand how those systems work and what levers we should be pulling and having these agencies pull. And I quite frankly don't think a lot of these marketing departments do either. So I think it's more just how much can we spend, try to just dump into these keywords and then see what happens. But that's what my real heartache is. Like not understanding the need to actually run these things efficiently instead of just putting in more dollars that we're not necessarily yielding results for.
If I had to reframe what you said, would you say it's instead of increasing the budget being like your first resort, making it closer to the last resort?
Yeah. Yes. What can we
Yeah.
do? Everything else. What can we do before we have to put more money in?
Often when I see people like scraping for more budget and it feels like such a challenge, if you're spending so much and you need to ask for more, that very much points to the fact that more budget is probably not going to solve the problem. You probably have some fundamental issues way before that you need to solve before you can even get to the point where increasing your budget makes sense. So
Yeah.
I have to agree with you there. I'm singing this from the rooftops. Like I hate that the first result is just press the budget button. Let's just ask for more money, because if you're spending 7, 8, 10, in some cases $14,000 a month, then more budget is really not going to do it for you. We have so many fundamental issues that we need to fix before that even becomes an option that we're willing to entertain. So,
Agreed.
Brendan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great hearing your insights. I love how dangerous you are at marketing in general. Like, I think a lot of people view marketing as one lever to pull, but you see it, if I'm gauging this correctly, you see it as like 100 levers within marketing that you can pull, which is just night and day versus most people I speak to. So thanks for gracing us with your wisdom.
We're trying. I'm not here to say we're there yet, but we're trying. We're trying to partner with groups like yourself and with other agencies to figure out the most efficient ways to do this, and then bring that as options to our clients.
Yeah, and I think, for what the next 5 years are going to look like, they're not going to be easy, and the people who come out on top are going to have the same approach that you have. So that's great.
Yeah, no, appreciate you having me.
Anytime. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Building Blocks. I hope you found some value in the conversation. If you want to get updated every time a new episode drops, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn at @EdenChai, or just head over to our website, getflare.io, and subscribe. You'll see our newsletter there as well. That's all for today. I'll catch you next time.